the first time Wade Thompson heard Nora Kensington sing. He forgot why he had walked into the general store in the first place. Standing frozen in the doorway with dust from the Colorado Trail still clinging to his boots, while her voice wrapped around him like warm honey on a cold morning. It was August of 1873, and Westcliffe had barely begun to establish itself as more than a scattered collection of buildings in the wet mountain valley. Wade had drifted into town 3 weeks prior, taking work at the Silver Cliff mines just north of the settlement, his hands already rough from years of ranch work in Wyoming territory. He had been 24 years old and certain he had seen enough of life to know that nothing could surprise him anymore. Then, Nora had opened her mouth and proved him wrong. She stood near the back of the store, a broom in her hands, sweeping the worn floorboards with steady strokes while her voice rose and fell with a melody he did not recognize. The song was something sweet and melancholy, about rivers and longing, and though Wade could not make out all the words, the feeling behind them struck him squarely in the chest. She was perhaps 21 or 22, with dark auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet, and a face that might not have stopped traffic in a big city, but seemed to Wade like the prettiest thing he had ever seen in the mountain sunlight streaming through the windows. He stood there long enough that the other customer in the store, old Mrs. Patterson, gave him a curious look as she shuffled past with her bundle of fabric. Wade cleared his throat and finally moved forward, though he could not for the life of him remember what supplies he actually needed. The store belonged to Nora's uncle, Edmund Kensington, a portly man with spectacles who stood behind the counter tallying numbers in a ledger. He glanced up as Wade approached. "Help you, son. I need." Wade's mind went blank as Nora's voice lifted again, this time with a higher note that seemed to dance in the air. "Tobacco, and maybe some coffee." Edmund nodded, moving to gather the items, and Wade found himself turning slightly, trying to catch another glimpse of the young woman who continued her work, apparently oblivious to his attention. The broom made soft, scratching sounds against the floor, keeping rhythm with her song. When she turned, he saw her face more clearly, the concentration in her expression as she worked, the slight smile that curved her lips as she sang. There was something pure about it, something that made the rough edges of Wade's life feel smoothed down just by proximity. He paid for his purchases, left the store, and found himself standing in the dusty street wondering what had just happened to him. The sun beat down on Westcliffe's main thoroughfare, and somewhere nearby a dog barked, but Wade heard only the echo of that voice in his head. The next day, he told himself he needed salt. The day after that, it was matches. By the end of the week, Edmund Kensington was giving him knowing looks as Wade invented increasingly unlikely reasons to visit the general store, always timing his arrival for the late afternoon when Nora did her sweeping and sang. She had come to Westcliffe 6 months earlier. Wade eventually learned through careful questions posed to the more talkative townsfolk. Her parents had died of fever back in Kansas, leaving her with few options and fewer resources. Edmund was her mother's brother, and he had taken her in with the understanding that she would help run the store. It was not charity exactly, but it was kindness, and Nora worked hard to earn her place. She minded the counter when Edmund made deliveries, kept the inventory organized, and swept the floors twice daily while singing the songs her mother had taught her. "You are here again," Edmund said one afternoon as Wade entered for the 3rd time that week. There was amusement in the older man's voice, though not unkindness. "Running low on supplies," Wade said, which was becoming less believable with each visit. "I imagine you are. Mining is hungry work." Edmund leaned against the counter, fixing Wade with a direct look. though I notice you always need supplies around 4 in the afternoon." Wade felt heat creep up his neck. From the back of the store, Nora's voice rose in a melody that sounded like church bells and mountain streams combined. "I suppose I like to shop when it is quiet," he managed. Edmund chuckled. "Quiet, that is one word for it." He glanced toward his niece, then back at Wade. "She is a good girl, been through more than most her age should have to bear." "I am sure she has," Wade said carefully, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "Deserves someone steady. Someone who would treat her right." Edmund pushed his spectacles up his nose. "Not some drifter who will be gone when the silver runs out." The words stung because there was truth in them. Wade had been drifting for 6 years, ever since his own family's ranch in Wyoming had failed during the hard winter of '67. He went where the work was, never staying long, never putting down roots. But something about Westcliffe felt different. Something about Nora's voice made him want to stop moving. "I have been thinking about that," Wade said quietly. "About staying." Edmund studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, in that case you probably need some more coffee. And you should know my niece prefers wildflowers to store-bought goods. There is a whole meadow of them up past the creek." Wade bought his coffee, tipped his hat to Edmund, and left with his heart hammering strangely in his chest. He had barely made it 5 steps when he heard the door open behind him. Mr. Thompson. He turned to find Nora standing in the doorway, the late afternoon sun turning her hair to copper fire. Up close, he could see that her eyes were green, the color of new leaves in spring. "Madam." He touched the brim of his hat, suddenly feeling like a schoolboy caught stealing apples. "You keep forgetting your change." She stepped forward, holding out 3 coins. "Yesterday and the day before. Uncle Edmund wanted me to make sure you got it today." Wade took the coins, his fingers accidentally brushing hers. "Thank you. I suppose I have been distracted." "Have you?" There was something in her voice, a note of curiosity or perhaps amusement, and Wade realized with a start that she had known all along. Known he was coming to hear her sing, known he was inventing reasons to be there. The thought should have embarrassed him, but instead he found himself smiling. "Yes, madam, very distracted." Nora looked at him for a moment, and something passed between them, an understanding that did not require words. "I sweep again tomorrow afternoon," she said, "in case you find yourself needing anything else." Then she turned and went back inside, leaving Wade standing in the street with 3 coins, and the feeling that his life had just changed direction without him quite realizing when it happened. That evening, Wade washed up at the boarding house where he rented a room, actually using soap instead of just splashing water on his face. His roommate, a grizzled miner named Jack Sullivan, watched this unusual behavior with raised eyebrows. "You courting someone?" Jack asked around his pipe. "Maybe, I do not know yet." "Does she know?" Wade thought about Nora's expression in the doorway, the slight smile that had played at her lips. "I think she might." Jack laughed, a rough sound that turned into a cough. "Well, you better figure it out soon, boy. Women do not like waiting around while a man makes up his mind." The next day, Wade woke before dawn and walked up past the creek Edmund had mentioned. The meadow was there, just as promised, full of late summer flowers swaying in the mountain breeze. He spent an hour picking the prettiest ones, creating a bouquet that looked somewhat bedraggled by the time he finished, but seemed to him like something fine. Then he went to work his shift at the mine, his hands blistering on the pick handle while his mind stayed far away, rehearsing what he might say. 4 o'clock found him freshly washed again, his hair slicked back with water, walking toward the general store with the flowers hidden behind his back. His heart beat so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. He pushed open the door and heard the sweetest sound in the world, Nora singing. This time the song was livelier, something with a rhythm that made her sweep in time with the melody. She wore a different dress today, blue calico that brought out the green of her eyes. When she saw him, she did not stop singing, but her smile widened. Edmund was nowhere in sight. Wade wondered if the older man had made himself scarce on purpose. Nora finished her verse and leaned on her broom handle. "Mr. Thompson, what brings you in today, Wade? Please call me Wade." He brought the flowers out from behind his back, feeling foolish and brave at the same time. "And these bring me in today, for you." Her expression softened as she looked at the wildflowers, reaching out to take them with a care that suggested they were precious. "They are beautiful. You picked them yourself." "Yes, madam, this morning. I would have brought them earlier, but I had work, and I thought they might wilt in the heat, so I left them in the creek to stay cool and—" He realized he was babbling and stopped. Nora lifted the bouquet to her face, breathing in their scent. "I love wildflowers. They are better than any garden rose." She met his eyes. "Thank you, Wade." The way she said his name made something warm spread through his chest. "I was wondering. That is, I wanted to ask." He took a breath, forced himself to slow down. "Would you allow me to call on you, properly, I mean?" "With your uncle's permission." "You already have his permission." Edmund's voice came from the back room, followed by the man himself, wearing an expression of poorly concealed satisfaction. "Not that it is entirely my decision. Nora is her own woman." Nora looked between them, color rising in her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I would like that," she said to Wade. "I would like that very much." Relief and joy flooded through Wade in equal measure. "Tomorrow is Sunday. Could I take you on a picnic after church?" "Yes." Her voice was soft but certain. "I would enjoy that." Wade left the store, walking on air, Edmund's knowing chuckle following him out into the street. He had been in Westcliffe for a month and had come to the general store every day for the past 2 weeks. Now he had a reason that went beyond listening to singing, though he hoped Nora would never stop filling the air with her music. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the kind of late summer day that made Colorado seem like heaven on earth. Wade attended the small church service in his best shirt, which was not saying much, but he had washed and mended it carefully. Nora sat with Edmund, and though Wade could not see her face from his position near the back, he found himself watching the curve of her neck, the way her hair caught the light coming through the windows. After the service, he approached with a basket borrowed from his landlady, Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house with stern efficiency and a secret romantic heart. She had packed the basket with fried chicken, biscuits, preserves, and even a small apple pie, refusing to let Wade pay extra despite his protests. "A man courting needs good food," she had said firmly. "You bring her back before dark." Now Wade offered his arm to Nora, feeling Edmund's watchful gaze on them both. "I thought we might walk along the creek. There is a spot where the cottonwoods grow that has some shade." "That sounds perfect." Nora placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, and they walked together through the town, past the few other buildings, toward the open land beyond. Westcliffe was still so new that wilderness felt close, just beyond the edges of settlement. The Sangre de Cristo Range rose to the west, purple and majestic against the sky, while the wet mountains hulked to the east. The creek ran cold and clear, fed by snowmelt from the high peaks, and cottonwood trees clustered along its banks, their leaves already beginning to show hints of the gold they would become in autumn. Wade spread a blanket under the largest tree, and they sat together, the basket between them. For a few moments, neither spoke, the silence full of awareness and possibility. Then Nora laughed, a bright sound that eased the tension. "This is strange, is it not? I have seen you nearly every day for weeks, but always across the store." Now we are here together, and I find myself uncertain what to say." Wade smiled, grateful for her honesty. "I know what you mean, though I have been practicing conversations in my head for days now and none of them seem to fit the moment." "What did you practice?" "Well, I thought I might ask you about Kansas, where you came from. But that seemed too serious for a first picnic. Then I thought I might tell you about Wyoming and the ranch, but that is a sad story in its own right. Then I considered just saying that I think you have the most beautiful voice I have ever heard, but I worried that might sound like empty flattery." Nora tilted her head, studying him. "It is not empty flattery if it is true. And I would like to hear about Wyoming and Kansas both, even the sad parts. Maybe especially the sad parts. They make us who we are." So they talked, passing food back and forth while their stories unfolded. Wade told her about the ranch where he had grown up, the youngest of 4 brothers, about winters so cold the cattle froze standing up, about the slow starvation of that final terrible season when the snow never stopped and the hay ran out. He told her about watching his father age 10 years in one winter, about the decision to sell what little was left, about his brothers scattering to Montana and California while Wade headed south. Nora listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving his face, and when he finished, she reached across the basket to touch his hand briefly. "I am sorry. Losing a home is like losing a person." Yes, he had never heard it put that way, but it was exactly right. "What about you, Kansas?" Her story came slower, with more pauses, as if the words cost her something to speak. Her parents had run a small dry goods store in Lawrence. Her father had fought in the war, came home changed, but trying to build a life anyway. Her mother had been the one who sang, always singing, filling their little house with music that made hard things bearable. Then the fever came through town in the winter of '72. Her father first, then her mother 3 days later. Nora had nursed them both, helpless against the sickness, watching them slip away. "I wrote to Uncle Edmund because I had nowhere else to go. The store had debts. Everything was sold to pay them. He sent money for the train and I came west." She looked out at the mountains. "I had never seen anything like these peaks. Kansas is so flat. When I first saw the Sangre de Cristos, I thought they were clouds on the horizon. Are you glad you came?" "Yes." She turned back to him, and her smile was genuine. "Especially recently." Wade felt his face warm. "I am glad you came too, though I am sorry for what brought you here." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easier as the afternoon wore on. Nora told him about learning to manage the store's inventory, about the characters who came through Westcliffe, about the way singing made her feel connected to her mother. Wade shared stories from his years of drifting, the mines and ranches and odd jobs, painting a picture of a life spent searching for something he had not been able to name until now. The sun was lowering toward the western peaks when Nora said, "Sing with me." Wade laughed. "I cannot sing. I sound like a rusty gate hinge. Everyone can sing. Come on, you must know something." She thought for a moment, then started humming a melody he recognized. "Oh, Susanna." When she reached the words, she looked at him expectantly. Feeling foolish but unable to refuse her, Wade joined in, his rough voice blending awkwardly with her clear one. She was right that he sounded terrible, but Nora just laughed and kept singing, encouraging him through the verses. By the end, they were both laughing, and Wade felt lighter than he had in years. "See, you can sing. I can make noise anyway. That is all singing is, noise with feeling behind it." She began packing up the remnants of their picnic, and Wade helped, their hands bumping occasionally in ways that felt both accidental and purposeful. Walking back toward town, the setting sun painting the valley in shades of amber and rose, Wade found the courage to take her hand. Nora's fingers intertwined with his without hesitation, and they walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, their connection saying more than words could. At the door of the living quarters above the general store, Nora turned to face him. "Thank you for today. It was lovely. Could I see you again? I know you are busy, but maybe another Sunday." Sunday is a long time to wait. Her eyes held mischief. "Perhaps you could stop by the store if you need anything." Wade grinned. "I always need something." "Yes." She stepped closer, rose on her toes, and kissed his cheek quickly before retreating. "I have noticed." Then she was gone, slipping inside and leaving Wade standing in the twilight with his hand pressed to where her lips had touched his face, feeling like the luckiest man in Colorado territory. The next weeks unfolded in a pattern of work and courtship that gave structure to Wade's days. He would wake before dawn, walk to the mine, spend 8 or 10 hours underground in the silver veins that were making some men rich and breaking others. The work was hard and dangerous, with constant risks of cave-ins and gas, but Wade approached it with new determination. He was no longer drifting, no longer just earning enough to move on. He was building something, saving money, thinking about the future. Every afternoon he stopped at the general store. Sometimes he bought supplies he actually needed. Other times, he invented purchases with a lack of subtlety that made Edmund roll his eyes but never complain. Always, he timed his arrival to hear Nora sing. Her repertoire seemed endless. Hymns and folk songs, ballads and work tunes, melodies she remembered from childhood and others she made up on the spot. Wade learned that she sang what matched her mood. Lively songs when business was good, softer melodies when the day had been hard. Love songs that made his heart hammer in his chest when she caught his eye across the store. Sundays became sacred. After church, they would picnic if the weather held or take walks through the town, exploring the growing settlement. Westcliffe was expanding as more prospectors flooded to the silver strikes in the nearby hills. New buildings appeared weekly, and the population grew from a few dozen to nearly 200 permanent residents. With growth came both opportunity and trouble, as men seeking quick fortune had little patience for law or decency. Wade watched these changes with mixed feelings. More people meant more business for Edmund's store, which was good for Nora. But it also meant more rough characters, more drinking and gambling and the violence that followed. He found himself becoming protective, walking Nora home on the evenings when Edmund had her working late, keeping an eye out for trouble. "You do not need to worry so much," Nora told him one evening in mid-September as they stood outside the store. The days were growing shorter, autumn creeping down from the high peaks. "I have been managing fine. I know you have. But things are changing. The town is not as safe as it was." She touched his arm, her expression softening. "I am glad you care, but Wade, you cannot protect me from everything. Life has risks. I know that too." He covered her hand with his. "But maybe we could face some of those risks together." Nora's eyes widened slightly. "What are you saying?" Wade had not planned this moment, had not prepared the words, but they came anyway. "I am saying I love you. I think I have loved you since the first day I heard you sing. I am saying I want to stop living in a boarding house room and start building a real life. I am saying." He took a breath. "I am saying I would like your uncle's permission to ask for your hand, if you think you might possibly consider accepting." The silence that followed felt eternal, though it probably lasted only seconds. Then Nora smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "I think I might more than consider it. I think I might say yes immediately if you asked properly." Joy flooded through Wade's chest, but he forced himself to slow down. "I should talk to Edmund first, do things right." "Yes, you should." She squeezed his hand. "But Wade, he will say yes, he has been hoping you would ask." He told me so last week. Wade laughed, the sound full of relief and happiness. Has everyone been discussing this except me, more or less? Mrs. Chen asked me what kind of wedding cake I wanted. I had to tell her we were not even engaged yet. What kind do you want? Lemon. With cream frosting. Lemon with cream frosting it is then. They stood together in the gathering dusk, and Wade pulled her close, holding her against his chest while her arms came around his waist. He could feel her heartbeat, quick and steady, matching his own. The moment felt perfect and fragile, like something that might shatter if he moved too quickly. "I love you too," Nora whispered against his shirt. "I started falling for you when you brought those wildflowers. Maybe even before that, when I noticed you coming every day with your terrible excuses to buy things. You are a horrible liar, Wade Thompson." He laughed, the sound rumbling in his chest. "Good thing I never have to lie to you then." The next day, Wade asked Edmund for a private conversation after the store closed. The older man ushered him into the back room, which served as both office and storage, and gestured to a chair while seating himself behind a battered desk covered in ledgers and receipts. "I know why you are here," Edmund said before Wade could speak, "and I appreciate you doing this properly. Shows character." "I want to marry Nora," Wade said, deciding direct was best. "I know I am not much, just a miner with no family and no property. But I work hard, and I have been saving money. I can provide for her. I will spend my life making sure she is happy and safe." Edmund leaned back in his chair, studying Wade with the same keen intelligence he applied to keeping his inventory balanced. "Nora is all the family I have left. Her mother was my only sister. When she died, I promised myself I would look after her daughter. That means not just giving her a roof and meals, but making sure she has a real future. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "So here is what I need to know. Are you going to drift away when the silver runs out? Because it will run out. These boom towns always collapse eventually. Men move on to the next strike, the next opportunity. Are you that kind of man?" Wade met Edmund's eyes squarely. "I was. For 6 years after my family lost our ranch, I was exactly that kind of man, moving on whenever something better appeared. But I am not anymore. Westcliffe is my home now because Nora is here. If the silver runs out, I will find other work. Ranch work, farming, guiding, whatever it takes. I am staying." Edmund nodded slowly. "Second question. Can you handle the fact that Nora is not some delicate flower who needs constant protecting? She is strong and smart. She has opinions. She will not just smile and obey and stay quiet. Her mother was like that, and Nora is her mother's daughter." This made Wade smile. "That is one of the things I love most about her. I do not want someone who just agrees with me. I want a partner." "Good answer." Edmund stood, extending his hand. "Then yes, you have my permission and my blessing. Treat her right, Wade. Make her happy. That is all I ask." Wade shook his hand, feeling like he was making a vow. "I will. I promise you that. I know you will. Now go tell her before she wears a hole in the floor upstairs from pacing." Wade climbed the narrow stairs to the living quarters, his heart hammering. The door opened before he could knock, and Nora stood there, her face anxious and hopeful. "Well," Wade dropped to one knee right there in the doorway, taking her hand. "Nora Kensington, I do not have a ring yet, but I could not wait another moment to ask. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life hearing you sing and loving you more every day?" "Yes." She pulled him to his feet and into her arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Wade kissed her then properly for the first time. Her lips were soft and warm, and the kiss tasted like happiness and promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, Nora was smiling so widely it seemed to light the whole dim hallway. "We should tell people," she said. Mrs. Chen will be so excited about that cake. Let them wait a little longer. Wade pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of soap and flour and something indefinably her. Let me just hold you for a moment. She settled against him with a contented sigh. From downstairs, they could hear Edmund moving around the store, and from outside, the sounds of Westcliffe going about its evening business. But in that small space at the top of the stairs, Wade felt like they were the only two people in the world. They set the wedding for late October, giving them 6 weeks to prepare. It was not much time, but Nora insisted she did not want a long engagement. "We have already wasted enough time being proper and cautious," she said. "I want to start our life together." Wade could not argue with that. He threw himself into preparations with the same determination he applied to his mine work. First, he needed a ring. The jeweler in Silver Cliff, the larger town 2 miles north, showed him several options, all of which seemed either too plain or too expensive. Finally, Wade settled on a simple gold band with a small garnet, the stone the color of mountain sunsets. It took most of his savings, but when he imagined it on Nora's finger, the cost seemed worthwhile. Next, he needed a house, or at least the promise of one. He could not bring Nora home to his boarding house room, sharing walls with snoring miners. He visited the land office and made inquiries about lots on the edge of town. The prices had risen sharply with Westcliffe's growth, but Wade found a piece of property near the creek, large enough for a small house and garden. He put down what money he had left as a deposit, promising to pay the rest in installments. Building the house would take time and money he did not yet have, but Edmund surprised him by offering help. "I have been thinking about expanding the business," the older man said one evening. "Opening a second store in Silver Cliff. I need a partner, someone I trust. Someone with a stake in the community." "Interested?" Wade stared at him. "I do not have capital to invest. You have labor. You have honesty. That is capital enough for me. We split the profits from the second store 60-40, my favor, which is fair since I am providing the initial inventory. You manage it, I manage this one. Nora can help with the books for both. It will be a family business." The offer was generous almost to the point of charity, but the serious look in Edmund's eyes made it clear this was business, not a handout. Wade thought about the possibilities. Silver Cliff was booming even faster than Westcliffe. A store there could make real money, and managing a business was steadier, safer work than the mines. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I am very interested. Thank you, Edmund. Do not thank me yet. I work hard and I will expect the same from you. But this way, my niece will not be married to a man who might get killed in a cave in any day. I think that is worth something." News of the engagement spread through Westcliffe like wildfire. The small community embraced the romance, perhaps grateful for something happy to discuss amid the usual talk of silver veins and claim disputes. Mrs. Chen immediately began planning the wedding meal, refusing to hear any protests about payment. "You pay me back by naming your first child Chen," she said. "First name, not middle name." The church ladies offered to decorate the small chapel with autumn flowers and evergreen boughs. The minister, a young man named Reverend Pike who had arrived in Westcliffe only 2 months earlier, seemed delighted to perform his first wedding in the new town. Even the rough miners who frequented the saloons congratulated Wade. Buying him drinks he had to politely refuse since he wanted to stay sober and focused on the work ahead. Through it all, Nora sang. She sang while helping plan the wedding, while hemming the simple white dress she had bought from the dressmaker, while teaching Wade to dance badly in the space above the store. Her voice had taken on a new quality, Wade thought, something even brighter and more joyful than before. Or perhaps he just heard it differently now, knowing she was singing partly for him. October arrived with a snap of cold that promised an early winter. The aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, and morning frost painted the valley white. Wade worked 14-hour days, splitting his time between his final weeks at the mine and helping Edmund establish the Silver Cliff store. He and another miner, a carpenter between claims, began framing the small house on Wade's lot, racing to get walls up before the serious snow arrived. The house would not be finished by the wedding. There was no avoiding that reality. But Edmund had agreed they could continue living above the Westcliffe store until spring, which gave Wade time to build properly rather than rush and create something shoddy. "I want our first real home to be solid," he told Nora as they stood on the bare lot one Sunday afternoon, surveying the skeletal frame of what would become their house. "Built to last. It will be perfect because it is ours." She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, both of them wrapped in coats against the autumn chill. "I cannot wait to see it finished, to plant a garden in the spring, to sit on that porch you have designed and watch the sun set behind the mountains. To fill it with furniture and dishes and all the things that make a place a home," Wade added, "to fill it with children eventually." Nora glanced up at him, color in her cheeks that was not entirely from the cold. "If you want that," Wade's heart swelled. "I want that very much. A whole house full of children who can hopefully sing better than their father," she laughed. "Anyone can sing better than you, but I love you anyway. I love you too." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "3 more weeks and you will be Nora Thompson." "I can hardly wait." The final weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Wade finished at the mine, collecting his last wages and saying goodbye to men he had worked beside for months. Some were envious of his change in fortune, but most seemed genuinely happy for him. Jack Sullivan, his former roommate, clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You landed on your feet, boy. Do not mess it up." "I will do my best." The Silver Cliff store opened with surprising success. Wade discovered he had a talent for retail he had not known he possessed, remembering customers' preferences, suggesting items that proved useful, keeping the displays organized and appealing. Edmund visited regularly to check on things, but seemed satisfied with how Wade managed the operation. Meanwhile, Nora worked on the wedding preparations with a combination of excitement and practicality that Wade found endearing. She wanted flowers but not extravagance, music but not fuss, a celebration but not a spectacle. "We are starting a life," she said. "That is what matters. Not whether the napkins match or the cake is fancy." Still, she did allow herself some dreams. She picked out fabric for curtains for their future house. She began collecting recipes from other women in town, building a notebook of meals she wanted to learn to cook. She hummed constantly, melodies that Wade now recognized as love songs, though she claimed she was not even aware she was doing it. The night before the wedding, Wade met with Edmund and Reverend Pike at the store to finalize the details. The ceremony would be simple, held in the church at 2 in the afternoon to allow people to arrive from nearby settlements. There would be a meal afterward in the church's attached social hall, with music and dancing for those who wished. Nora would wear her white dress and carry wildflowers, dried and preserved from the summer meadows. Wade would wear his best clothes, which Edmund had insisted on supplementing with a new vest and jacket from the store's inventory, refusing payment. "You are family now," Edmund said when Wade protested. "This is my wedding gift." After the meeting, Wade returned to the boarding house for the last time. He had paid his account with Mrs. Chen, packed his few belongings into a trunk that would move to the room above the Westcliffe store. As he lay in the narrow bed, Listening to the familiar sounds of the boarding house at night, Wade thought about how much his life had changed in 3 months. 3 months ago, he had been a drifter with no plans beyond the next paycheck. Now he was a business owner, a homeowner, and about to become a husband. The transformation seemed almost miraculous, all because he had walked into a general store and heard a woman singing. No, he corrected himself. Not just because of that, because he had been brave enough to keep coming back. Because Nora had been open enough to see what he was offering. Because Edmund had taken a chance on him. Because life sometimes lined up in ways that felt like destiny, even though Wade knew it was really just choice and chance and courage combined. Tomorrow, he would marry Nora Kensington. Tomorrow, his real life would begin. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline autumn morning that made Colorado famous. Wade woke early, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. He washed and dressed with unusual care, his hands shaking slightly as he fastened the buttons on his new vest. The jacket fit perfectly, and when he looked at himself in the small mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. Not the drifter anymore. Someone settled. Someone building something permanent. Jack Sullivan, who had agreed to stand up with Wade at the ceremony, arrived at the boarding house to walk with him to the church. "You look like a real gentleman," Jack said. "Almost respectable. Almost. Well, I know you." Hard to forget the man who once spent 3 days underground eating nothing but jerky and swearing at stubborn rock. Wade laughed, grateful for the levity that eased his nerves. They walked together through Westcliffe, past the general store that was closed for the day, past the lots where new buildings were going up, toward the small white church at the end of the main street. Already, people were gathering, dressed in their Sunday best, waiting for the celebration to begin. Inside, Reverend Pike was arranging things at the altar, adjusting the evergreen boughs and autumn leaves that the church ladies had used to decorate. He smiled when he saw Wade. "Ready." "More than ready." "Good. It should start in about 30 minutes. Nervous?" "Yes, but the good kind of nervous." Jack positioned himself near the front while Wade stood at the altar, watching as the church filled. He recognized most of the faces. Miners from his crew, merchants from town, customers from both stores. Mrs. Chen, in a beautiful silk dress that suggested her past, included more prosperity than her current circumstances. Edmund arrived and nodded to Wade, his expression pleased before disappearing, presumably to walk Nora down the aisle. The small church had no organ, but someone had brought a fiddle, and the musician began playing a melody that silenced the murmuring crowd. Then the doors at the back opened, and Nora appeared on Edmund's arm. Wade's breath caught. She wore the white dress, simple but elegant, with her hair down in loose waves around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers mixed with late-blooming asters, and her face glowed with happiness. As she walked toward him, her eyes never left his, and Wade felt something settle deep in his chest. This was right. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it. Edmund placed Nora's hand in Wade's, and the older man's eyes were suspiciously bright as he stepped back. Reverend Pike began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the small space, speaking of love and commitment and the journey that was marriage. Wade heard the words but focused mostly on Nora, on the way her hand felt in his, on the slight tremble he could feel in her fingers that matched his own. When it came time for the vows, his voice rang out clear and strong. "I, Wade Thompson, take you, Nora Kensington, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by you in all circumstances. I promise to build a life with you that is worthy of the gift you are giving me today. I promise to listen to you sing for the rest of my days, and to never stop being grateful that I walked into that store and heard your voice." There was laughter at that last part, warm and affectionate, but Nora was crying, tears streaming down her face as she smiled at him. Then it was her turn. I, Nora Kensington, take you, Wade Thompson, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and walk beside you through whatever comes. I promise to build a home with you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to keep singing because my songs are for you now. They always have been, from the first day you walked through that door. Reverend Pike blessed the rings, the simple gold bands they had chosen. Wade slipped the garnet ring onto Nora's finger, followed by the wedding band, and she placed the plain gold ring on his. Then the Reverend spoke the words they had been waiting to hear. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wade, you may kiss your bride. Wade cupped Nora's face in his hands, gently wiping away her tears with his thumbs, and kissed her softly. The church erupted in applause and cheers, but Wade heard only his heartbeat and Nora's soft sigh of contentment against his lips. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, husband and wife, while the fiddle played a joyful tune and people called out congratulations. Outside, in the clear autumn sunlight, Wade pulled Nora close and kissed her again, properly this time, while someone whooped and others laughed. Mrs. Thompson, he said, testing out the name. I like the sound of that, Nora replied, her face radiant. Say it again. Mrs. Thompson, my wife, Nora Thompson, she laughed, joy bubbling out of her. Yes, yes, that is me now, that is who I am. The celebration that followed was everything they had hoped for and more. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, laying out platters of roasted meat, potatoes, vegetables, bread, and yes, a magnificent lemon cake with cream frosting that drew admiring comments from everyone who tasted it. The church hall filled with people, the small community coming together to celebrate the union. After the meal, the fiddle player was joined by a man with a guitar and another with a harmonica, and music filled the space. Wade danced with Nora, his steps clumsy but earnest, while she laughed and guided him through the patterns. Then Edmund claimed a dance with his niece, and Jack awkwardly offered to dance with Mrs. Chen, who accepted with regal dignity. As the afternoon stretched into evening, people drifted in and out, some leaving to tend to animals or children, others arriving who had been working and could not attend the ceremony. The music continued, and at some point, someone called for Nora to sing. She blushed, but did not refuse, standing near the musicians while they found a song they all knew. Then her voice rose, that clear, beautiful sound that had started everything, singing about love and home and finding where you belong. The room fell silent except for the music, everyone transfixed, and Wade felt his throat tighten with emotion. This woman was his wife. That voice would be part of his life every day from now on. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Nora laughed and curtsied and returned to Wade's side, where he pulled her close and whispered, "Beautiful. You are so beautiful and I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered back. As the sun set behind the western peaks, casting the valley in purple shadow, the celebration began to wind down. People made their farewells, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Edmund hugged them both, his eyes suspiciously damp. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Nora. "So very proud. You have found a good man and you are starting a good life together. Thank you, Uncle, for everything, for taking me in, for giving me a home, for accepting Wade. He makes you happy. That is all I ever wanted." Edmund turned to Wade. "Take care of her." "Every day for the rest of my life," Wade promised. Finally, they walked through the darkening streets to the general store, climbing the stairs to the living quarters that would be their home for the next several months. Edmund had discreetly arranged to stay with a friend for the night, giving them privacy. Someone, probably one of the church ladies, had left wildflowers in a vase on the table and turned down the bed. Wade lit a lamp, the warm glow filling the small space. Now that they were alone, a different kind of nervousness settled over both of them. They were married, but they were also still learning each other, still discovering how to navigate this new closeness. Nora reached up to remove her hairpins and Wade stopped her. "Let me." She nodded, turning so he could carefully remove each pin, letting her auburn hair fall in waves down her back. He ran his fingers through it, marveling at its softness, and Nora sighed contentedly. "I have dreamed of this," she said quietly. "Of being married to you, of starting our life together. Sometimes I worried I was being foolish, that I was falling too fast, but it felt so right. It is right." Wade turned her to face him, his hands resting on her waist. "I have never been surer of anything." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "You need to shave more often," she teased gently. "Your beard is rough." "I will shave every day if you want. No, I like it. I like everything about you." She rose on her toes to kiss him, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more than the chaste kisses they had shared during their courtship. Wade picked her up, making her laugh in surprise, and carried her to the bed. They learned each other slowly in the lamplight, with tenderness and care, taking time to explore and discover. Nora's laughter mixed with softer sounds, and Wade murmured words of love against her skin. When they finally came together, it was both awkward and perfect, a beginning that promised better things ahead as they learned what pleased each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Nora's head on Wade's chest while he stroked her hair. The lamp had burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Are you happy?" Wade asked. "So happy I could burst from it. You, more than I knew was possible." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter who walked into your uncle's store." Nora propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You were never just a drifter. You were a man looking for home, and you found it. We found it together." "Yes." Wade pulled her back down into his arms. "We found it together." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, beginning the first night of their married life with contentment and love filling the small room above the general store. The next months unfolded with a rhythm that felt both new and natural. Wade and Nora settled into married life, learning the small intimacies that came with sharing space and building a life together. They learned each other's morning habits, Nora's tendency to wake early and Wade's preference for a few extra minutes of sleep. They learned to navigate the small kitchen, working together to prepare meals, laughing when things burned or turned out strange. They learned to talk through disagreements rather than letting resentment fester, both of them determined to build a strong foundation. The Silver Cliff store continued to thrive under Wade's management. He made the 2-mile journey between towns several times a week, often staying overnight in a small room behind the store when weather was bad or business demanded it. He hated the nights away from Nora, but they both understood it was necessary to build their financial security. Nora divided her time between helping Edmund in the Westcliffe store and managing the books for both locations. She had a head for numbers that surprised Edmund, catching errors and identifying opportunities to increase profits. "Your mother was like this too," Edmund told her. "Smart with business. It is a gift." Work on the house continued through the late autumn and into the early winter, though progress slowed as the weather worsened. Wade and his carpenter friend, a man named Robert Hayes, managed to get the roof on, and the windows installed before the first serious snow, which meant they could work inside even when the weather was bitter. By Christmas, the house had interior walls and a functioning stove, though it still lacked finishing touches. Christmas itself was a quiet affair. Wade and Nora spent the day in their room above the store, exchanging simple gifts. Wade had carved Nora a music box from pine, the mechanism bought from a tinker who passed through town. It played a simple melody when wound, and Nora cried when she opened it. Her gift to him was a new leather journal and pencil for recording business matters and whatever else he wished. Inside, she had written on the first page, "To my husband who is building our future one day at a time, I love you always. Nora Thompson." They made love slowly that morning, the room cold except where their bodies touched, then spent the afternoon in bed reading aloud to each other from one of the books Edmund had given them. It was simple and perfect, exactly the kind of quiet happiness Wade had never known he was missing. January brought serious cold, the kind of weather that made travel between Westcliffe and Silver Cliff treacherous. Wade spent more nights away from Nora than he liked, and she missed him fiercely. They wrote letters even though they saw each other every few days, filling pages with thoughts and observations and expressions of love. Wade saved every letter she wrote, keeping them in a tin box under the bed. February saw a break in the weather, and Robert pushed to finish the house before the next round of storms. Wade worked alongside him every moment he could spare, hammering and painting and installing the cupboards Edmund had ordered as a wedding gift. Nora visited the site frequently, bringing them hot coffee and food, offering suggestions that usually improved whatever they were working on. By early March, the house was finished. It was small, just 3 rooms. A main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a spare room that could become a nursery or guest room as needed. But it was solid and tight, with good windows and a sturdy roof. And when Wade carried Nora across the threshold for the first time, she laughed and cried and declared it the most beautiful house in all of Colorado. They spent the next weeks moving in, arranging the simple furniture they had bought or been given. Mrs. Chen had sent a beautiful quilt. Edmund provided dishes and cookware from the store, refusing payment. The church ladies donated preserves and dried goods to stock the pantry. The community had embraced them, helping the young couple establish their home. On their first night in the finished house, they sat on the porch Wade had built, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring evening, watching the sun set behind the Sangre de Cristos. "Can you believe we are here?" Nora asked, her head on Wade's shoulder. "Can you believe we have built this? Sometimes I still feel like I am going to wake up back in that boarding house, and this will all have been a dream." "It is not a dream." She took his hand, placing it on her stomach, which had just begun to show the slightest curve. "This is real, all of it." Wade's breath caught. They had suspected for a few weeks but had not been certain until the doctor confirmed it 3 days earlier. Nora was pregnant, due in late September or early October. The news had filled Wade with a complex mixture of joy and terror. He was going to be a father. He was going to be responsible for a tiny human life. "Are you scared?" Nora asked, reading his expression. Terrified, but also excited. "You?" "The same. But Wade, we will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." "I know." He kissed her temple. "I just want to be a good father. I want to give our children everything I did not have. Stability, security, a home that does not disappear in a bad winter." "You will. We will." She tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "Our children will be so loved. They will grow up hearing about how their father walked into a store every day just to hear their mother sing. They will grow up knowing what real love looks like." "Will you still sing?" Wade asked. "Once the baby comes," Nora smiled. "Of course. I will sing lullabies. I will sing while I work. I will sing because it is part of who I am. Our baby will grow up surrounded by music." "Good. I love your singing." "I know. It is why you married me." one of many reasons. The singing just got my attention first. They sat together until the stars came out, brilliant against the dark sky, talking about the future they were building. They talked about names for the baby, though they could not decide on anything yet. They talked about expanding the businesses, perhaps opening a third store in one of the other mining camps. They talked about adding onto the house as their family grew. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the way only people deeply in love can be. Spring turned to summer, and Westcliffe continued to grow. The town now had a proper school, a doctor who stayed instead of just passing through, and 3 churches serving different denominations. The silver boom showed no signs of slowing, though Wade, remembering his conversation with Edmund, worked hard to build wealth that did not depend entirely on the mines. The stores were profitable, and he had begun investing carefully in property and other businesses. Nora worked in the Westcliffe store through most of her pregnancy, though Edmund eventually insisted she stop the heavier tasks as her belly grew. She still sang while sweeping, though her movements were slower now, more careful. Customers had grown accustomed to the music, and several people mentioned that they timed their shopping to hear her afternoon songs. Wade found himself even more protective as Nora's pregnancy advanced, worrying about everything from her climbing stairs to whether she was eating enough. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, knowing it came from love, though she occasionally had to remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. She told him one evening when he fussed about her walking home from the store. "I promise I will not break. I know, I just worry. I know you do. It is one of the things I love about you, but Wade, you have to trust that I know my own body. The doctor says everything is progressing normally. I am healthy and strong." He pulled her close as her belly allowed. "I love you so much. You and this baby. If anything happened to either of you, I do not know what I would do. Nothing is going to happen. We are going to have this baby, and it is going to be perfect, and you are going to be an amazing father." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Feel that? The baby is kicking. That is your son or daughter saying hello." Wade felt the flutter of movement under his palm and felt his eyes sting with tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your father, and I cannot wait to meet you." In early September, Wade insisted that Nora stop working entirely. The baby was due in a matter of weeks, and he wanted her to rest and prepare. Nora agreed, though she admitted she would miss the daily routine of the store. She spent her time putting final touches on the nursery, sewing blankets and tiny clothes, preparing for the arrival that dominated both their thoughts. The baby came on September 20th, 1874, during a thunderstorm that shook the house and lit the sky with brilliant flashes. Nora's labor started in the afternoon, and Wade immediately sent for the doctor and Mrs. Chen, who had offered to help. Then he paced the main room while Nora breathed through contractions in the bedroom, occasionally calling for him to come hold her hand. The labor was long, stretching through the evening and into the night. Wade had never felt more helpless, watching Nora endure pain he could not ease, offering water and encouragement and feeling utterly inadequate. But Nora was strong, stronger than he had known, working through each wave of contractions with determination. Finally, near midnight, the baby's cries filled the small house. Wade, who had been banished to the main room for the final stage, rushed back in to find Mrs. Chen holding a tiny, red-faced, squalling infant. "You have a son," the doctor announced, smiling. "A healthy baby boy." Wade moved to Nora's side, seeing her exhausted face break into a radiant smile as Mrs. Chen placed the baby in her arms. The infant quieted immediately at his mother's touch, his tiny face scrunching as he looked around with unfocused eyes. "Hello, my beautiful boy," Nora whispered. "Hello, my son." Wade sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Nora, the other hand gently touching his son's downy head. He was overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his face unchecked. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." "What should we name him?" Nora asked, looking up at Wade. They had discussed many possibilities but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son's tiny, perfect face, Wade knew, "William, after my father. William Edmund Thompson, if you approve of using your uncle's name." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. Hello, William. Welcome to the world." The doctor finished his examinations, declaring both mother and baby healthy, and left with promises to return the next day. Mrs. Chen cleaned up efficiently, then squeezed Wade's shoulder. "You did good," she said. "Now let them rest." Alone with his family, Wade lay on the bed beside Nora, the three of them together in the lamplight. William nursed for the first time, guided by Nora's instinct and Mrs. Chen's quick instructions before she left. Then he slept, tiny fist curled against his mother's chest. "I cannot believe he is real," Wade whispered. "That we made this person. He is real, and he is ours." Nora smiled tiredly. "We are a family now, a real family. We have been a family since the day we married. But yes, now we are 3 instead of 2. Wade kissed her forehead gently. "You were so brave, so strong. I am in awe of you." "Wait until he keeps us up all night crying. You might be less in awe then." Wade laughed quietly. "I will still be in awe, always." The first months of parenthood were harder than either Wade or Nora had anticipated. William was a healthy baby, but he was also demanding, waking every few hours to nurse, crying when he needed changing or was simply uncomfortable. Sleep became a precious commodity, and both new parents walked around in a state of constant exhaustion. But there was also joy, so much joy that it almost hurt. Watching William discover his hands, seeing his first real smile, hearing the small noises he made as he slept. Wade found himself staring at his son for long minutes, marveling that this person existed, that he was responsible for protecting and raising him. Nora sang to William constantly, lullabies and folk songs, and just whatever melody came to her. The baby seemed to recognize her voice, calming when she sang even when he had been fussy moments before. Wade loved watching them together, mother and son, Nora's voice weaving a cocoon of love and security around their child. Work continued at both stores, though Wade hired additional help to give himself more time at home. A young man named Peter Grant, 17 and eager, took on many of the daily tasks at the Westcliffe store, with Wade checking in several times a week rather than managing every day. It cut into their profits slightly, but Wade did not care. No amount of money was worth missing these early months of his son's life. Edmund doted on his great-nephew, stopping by the house almost daily with some excuse to see the baby. He brought toys he carved himself, wooden animals and blocks, things William would not be able to use for months, but that Edmund could not resist making. "I never had children of my own," he admitted to Wade one afternoon. "This is the closest I will get, and I intend to spoil him thoroughly." "He is lucky to have you as a great uncle," Wade said sincerely. "We all are." Winter came. Wade and Nora's second in the house, but this time they were prepared with ample firewood and well-stocked pantries. They spent the cold months mostly inside, the 3 of them, learning to be a family. William grew rapidly, changing almost daily, becoming more alert and interactive. By Christmas, he was laughing at Wade's funny faces and reaching for objects with increasing coordination. For Christmas, Wade gave Nora a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Denver, deep blue wool with embroidered flowers. She gave him a leather wallet she had made herself, stitched carefully during William's naps. But the real gift was the day itself, spent together in their warm house while snow fell outside, William playing on a blanket on the floor while his parents watched with besotted expressions. "This is what I always wanted," Nora said, leaning against Wade's shoulder. "A family, a home. People to love who love me back. Me too. Though I did not realize it until I heard you singing in that store," she smiled. "Do you ever think about that day? What would have happened if you had not come in all the time? I would have missed everything. The best parts of my life would not have happened. You would have found happiness somewhere else, with someone else." Wade shook his head firmly. "No, it was always going to be you, Nora. From the first note I heard you sing, it was you. I would have kept coming back until you noticed me, until you gave me a chance." "I noticed you the first day," she admitted. "This handsome cowboy who kept staring at me while pretending to shop. It was charming. I was not a cowboy, I was a miner. You wore cowboy boots. And you had that look about you. Like you belonged on the open range, not underground." Wade considered this. "Maybe you are right. I never felt like a miner, not really. I was just doing it for the money. But now, with the stores, I feel like I found what I am supposed to be doing. A shopkeeper." Nora teased gently. "A businessman. A family man. Someone building something that lasts." William made a noise, and they both looked down to see him gnawing on his fist, drool running down his chin. Nora laughed and picked him up, wiping his face with a cloth. "You are hungry again, are you?" "You are always hungry." Wade watched her nurse their son, the domestic scene filling him with a contentment so deep it felt like being rooted to the earth. This was his life now. This house, this woman, this child. After years of drifting, he had found his place. The years that followed were good ones. Westcliffe and Silver Cliff continued to grow, and the Thompson family businesses grew with them. By 1876, they had opened a third store, this one in Querida, a smaller mining camp about 5 miles south. Wade oversaw all 3 locations while Nora managed the books and inventory, her sharp mind for business proving invaluable. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler who looked like his mother and had his father's determination. He loved music, as they had hoped, singing along tunelessly to his mother's songs and banging on pots like drums. Wade taught him to ride before he was 3, setting the boy on a gentle mare and leading her around while William shrieked with delight. In the spring of 1877, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous, knowing what to expect, though she was also more tired, chasing after an active 2-year-old while carrying another child. The baby, a girl they named Margaret Rose after Nora's mother, arrived in November during the first snowstorm of the season. Margaret was different from William from the beginning, quieter and more observant, watching the world with serious gray eyes. She was also easier, sleeping longer stretches and fussing less. Nora joked that the universe was giving them a break after William's demanding infancy. "Or preparing us for the next one to be even harder," Wade replied, and Nora threw a pillow at him, laughing. They did not plan for a third child, but in 1879, Nora found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder, leaving her exhausted and nauseous for months. Wade worried constantly, but the doctor assured them everything was progressing normally. Some women simply had more difficult pregnancies. Thomas Wade Thompson arrived in July of 1880, during a heat wave that made the entire valley miserable. He was a large baby and the birth was difficult, but both mother and son came through healthy. Thomas had his father's features and his mother's coloring, and a set of lungs that could wake the entire household. With 3 children under 6, the house suddenly felt much smaller. Wade began planning an addition, 2 more bedrooms to give the family more space. Edmund insisted on funding half the construction as a gift. "You have given me grandchildren in all but name," he said. "It is the least I can do." The addition was completed by the end of 1881, doubling the size of the house. Now there was a proper bedroom for the boys to share, a smaller room for Margaret, and Wade and Nora finally had space that was just theirs, a retreat from the chaos of family life. Life settled into a rhythm defined by the seasons and the needs of 3 growing children. Summers were filled with outdoor adventures, teaching the children to ride and explore the mountains safely. Autumns brought preparation for winter, canning and preserving and stocking the wood shed. Winters were cozy and close. The family gathered around the stove while snow piled up outside. Springs were for planting the garden and watching the valley turn green again. Through it all, Nora sang. She sang while cooking and cleaning, while helping the children with their lessons, while working in the garden. Her voice was as beautiful as ever, and it remained the soundtrack of their lives. The children grew up surrounded by music, and each of them inherited their mother's talent to varying degrees. William had a good voice and perfect pitch. Margaret was shy about singing but could harmonize beautifully when coaxed. Thomas, true to his loud personality, bellowed songs at top volume with more enthusiasm than skill. Wade still stopped by the Westcliffe store most afternoons, timing his visits for when Nora was there helping Edmund. She did not sweep anymore, those days behind her, but sometimes she would sing while organizing shelves or going through invoices, and Wade would stop whatever he was doing to listen. Even after nearly 10 years of marriage, her voice still affected him the same way, stopping time and making everything else fade away. One afternoon, in the spring of 1883, Wade arrived at the store to find Edmund sitting behind the counter looking tired. The older man was 72 now, and the years were catching up with him. He still worked every day, but his movements were slower, and he napped in his chair more often. "You should retire," Wade told him, not for the first time. "Let Nora and me take over completely. You have earned your rest." Edmund smiled. "And do what? Sit around all day? I would go mad. Besides, I like working, I like seeing people, it keeps me young." "You are not young, and pushing yourself too hard is not helping," Nora said, emerging from the back room with William and Margaret, who had accompanied her to town for supplies. "Wade is right. You should at least cut back on your hours." "Maybe," Edmund conceded. "We will see." But that summer, Edmund fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then weakness that forced him to finally admit he could not work. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia, and despite treatment, Edmund grew weaker. By August, it was clear he was dying. Wade and Nora moved him into their house, setting up a bed in the main room where he could be surrounded by family. The children visited him daily, reading to him or just sitting quietly, understanding in the way children do that something important was happening. Edmund lingered for 3 weeks, fading slowly but remaining lucid until near the end. On one of the last good days, he called Wade and Nora to his bedside together. "I need to tell you both something," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I am proud of you, of what you have built together. Nora, your mother would be so happy to see the woman you have become, the family you have created. And Wade, you have exceeded every hope I had when I agreed to let you court my niece. You are a good man, a good husband, a good father. Uncle Edmund," Nora was crying, holding his hand. "Please do not. You are going to be fine." "No, I am not, and that is all right. I have lived a good life. I got to see you happy. I got to know your children. That is more than many people get." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Keep singing, Nora, promise me. Keep filling the world with music." "I promise." Edmund turned to Wade. "Take care of them, all of them, and take care of the businesses we built together. They are your legacy now. I will, I promise." Wade's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Edmund, for everything, for taking a chance on a drifter, for giving me a family. You gave yourself a family by being someone worth loving." Edmund smiled faintly. "Now leave an old man to rest. Send William in. I want to hear him sing." They sent William in, and the 9-year-old sat by his great-uncle's bed, singing the songs his mother had taught him in a clear, sweet voice. Edmund listened with his eyes closed, smiling peacefully. By the time the boy finished, Edmund had slipped into sleep. He died 2 days later, quietly in the night, surrounded by the family he had helped create. They buried him in the small cemetery on the edge of town, next to the plot reserved for Nora's parents when their remains could be brought west someday. Reverend Pike performed the service, and it seemed like the entire town turned out to pay respects. Edmund had been one of Westcliffe's founding citizens, and he was loved and respected by many. The weeks after Edmund's death were hard. Nora grieved deeply for the uncle who had saved her, given her a home, and walked her down the aisle. Wade grieved for the man who had become a father figure, who had seen potential in him when he was just a drifter with nothing to offer. The children missed their great uncle, especially William, who had been close to him, but life continued, as it always does. Wade took over full ownership of all 3 stores, determined to honor Edmund's legacy by making them prosper. Nora helped when she could, balancing business with raising 3 active children. They worked together, supporting each other through the grief, and gradually the raw pain faded into a gentler sadness, the loss becoming part of the fabric of their lives rather than overwhelming it. By 1885, Wade and Nora had been married 12 years. The silver boom that had built Westcliffe was beginning to fade as the easy veins played out, but the town had established enough of an economic base to survive. The stores were profitable, and Wade had diversified into other investments that provided steady income. They were not wealthy by Denver standards, but they were comfortable and secure in a way that would have seemed impossible when Wade first arrived as a broke miner. The children were growing. William, at 11, was tall for his age and already helping in the stores on weekends, showing a head for business that pleased Wade. Margaret, at 7, was shy but brilliant, reading everything she could get her hands on and showing an artistic talent that suggested she took after her grandfather's creative side. Thomas, at 5, was pure energy and mischief, constantly getting into trouble but charming his way out of it with a smile that reminded Nora of Wade. On their 12th anniversary, Wade arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch the children and took Nora on a picnic, returning to the spot by the creek where they had shared their first meal together. It was late October, the aspens golden on the mountainsides, the air crisp with the promise of coming winter. They sat on the same blanket, eating sandwiches and drinking coffee, and Wade looked at his wife, seeing the woman she had become. She was 33 now, with fine lines starting at the corners of her eyes, her figure fuller after 3 children. She was more beautiful to him than ever. "What are you thinking?" Nora asked, catching him staring. "That I am the luckiest man alive. That I would do it all again exactly the same way. That I love you more today than I did 12 years ago, which I would not have thought possible." She smiled, the expression lighting her whole face. "I love you too, so much. Even when you snore, even when you track mud through the house, even when you fuss over me like I am made of glass. I do not fuss, you absolutely fuss, but it is sweet, so I allow it." Wade laughed and pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day? That our children would grow up knowing what real love looks like?" "Yes." I think we have succeeded. When I watch William help Margaret with her reading or Thomas share his toys, I see them learning how to love from watching us. That is a good legacy. It is the best legacy. Nora settled against him, her head on his shoulder. Better than the stores or the house or any amount of money, we are teaching them what matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the creek flow past, listening to the wind in the cottonwood trees. After a while, Nora began to hum, then to sing softly, one of the melodies Wade recognized from their early days. Her voice was older now with a deeper richness, but it still had that quality that had captured his heart so completely. "I still love hearing you sing," Wade said when she finished. "After all these years, it still makes my heart race." "Good. I plan to keep singing for at least another 50 years. You are stuck with it. I cannot imagine anything better." As the sun lowered toward the peaks, they packed up their picnic and walked home hand in hand, to the house they had built together, to the children who were their greatest achievement, to the life they had created from a chance meeting in a general store. Wade thought about the man he had been when he arrived in Westcliffe, lost and drifting and uncertain. That man would not recognize who he had become, settled, content, surrounded by love, all because he had walked into a store and heard a woman singing. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of family life. William grew into a responsible young man, eventually taking over day-to-day management of the Westcliffe store when he was 19, showing a business acumen that impressed even Wade. Margaret discovered a passion for teaching and began helping at the town school while pursuing further education through correspondence courses. Thomas, true to form, caused chaos wherever he went, but with such good humor that people forgave him almost anything. In 1890, when Wade was 41 and Nora 39, they were surprised to discover Nora was pregnant again. After a 10-year gap, they had assumed their family was complete. But life had other plans, and that December they welcomed a fourth child, a daughter they named Eleanor Joy. Eleanor was a surprise and a delight, arriving when her siblings were old enough to help care for her. She became the baby of the family in the truest sense, doted on by everyone. She had Nora's voice, they discovered early, often humming tunelessly as an infant and progressing to actual songs as she grew. By the time she was 5, she could harmonize with her mother, the two voices blending beautifully. The new century arrived, bringing changes to Westcliffe and the world beyond. Electricity reached the valley in 1903, and Wade had their house wired, marveling at the bright, clean light that replaced lamps and candles. Automobiles appeared occasionally on the streets, though horses still dominated. The railroad expanded, making travel easier and bringing new people and ideas to the mountain towns. Through all the changes, some things remained constant. Wade still visited the Westcliffe store most afternoons. Nora still sang, her voice perhaps not quite as clear as it had been in her youth, but still beautiful, still capable of stopping Wade in his tracks. They still held hands while walking through town. They still said, "I love you," every night before sleep. In 1907, William married a local girl named Sarah Preston, and in 1908, they gave Wade and Nora their first grandchild, a boy named Edmund after Nora's uncle. Becoming grandparents felt both strange and wonderful, watching their son experience the same joys and fears they had felt decades earlier. Margaret married in 1910, wedding a teacher from Denver she had met through her correspondence courses. Thomas, surprising everyone, settled down at 26 with a rancher's daughter and proved to be an attentive husband despite his wild youth. Eleanor showed no signs of rushing into marriage, focused instead on her music and helping manage the family businesses. In 1915, Wade and Nora celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. Wade was 66, Nora 64, and they were surrounded by children, grandchildren, and a community they had helped build. The anniversary celebration filled their house, now expanded again to accommodate family gatherings, with music and laughter and love. Late in the evening, after the guests had departed and the grandchildren had been taken home by their parents, Wade and Nora sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. Inside, Alina was cleaning up, her voice rising in song as she worked. "She sounds like you did," Wade said. "That first day, the day I walked into the store," Nora smiled. "That was a long time ago. Feels like yesterday, feels like a lifetime ago, both at once." Wade took her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "I have loved every minute of these 42 years. Even the hard parts, even the hard parts. Edmund dying, worrying about the children, the business struggles, all of it, because we faced it together. We did." Nora leaned against him and Wade wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "We built something good, did we not? A family, a life, a legacy. The best legacy, not the stores or the property, the love we created, the children and grandchildren who will carry it forward." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to Alina sing inside, watching the stars appear overhead. Wade thought about the young man he had been, walking into a general store with no expectations beyond buying supplies, and hearing a voice that changed everything. He thought about the courage it had taken to keep coming back, to risk rejection, to open his heart after years of keeping it closed. He thought about Nora, sweeping the floors of her uncle's store and filling the space with music, because it connected her to her mother, because it made hard things bearable, because she had to sing the way some people had to breathe. He thought about how lucky he was that she had said yes, that she had taken a chance on him, that she had built this life alongside him. "I would do it all again," Wade said quietly. "Every single moment exactly the same, just to end up here with you." Nora turned her face up to kiss him, and even after 42 years, the touch of her lips still made his heart race. "Me too," she whispered. "Always and forever, me too." Inside, Alina's voice rose in a familiar melody, one of the songs Nora used to sing while sweeping all those years ago, passed down from mother to daughter like a precious gift. Wade listened, holding his wife, thinking about the circle of life and love and music that had defined their years together. He had walked into a general store. He had heard a woman singing, and everything had changed. That was their story. That would always be their story, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything,